Every tribe has a protocol. Not a law, not a written code, but a three-step process that has existed for thousands of years. Boundary. They draw it. Warning. They give it. Execution. They deliver it. 10 people in this video crossed that boundary. All of them received a warning. None of them came back. Case 1. Mark and Olga. On January 26, 2006, two fishermen named Sundar Raj and Pandit Tiwari anchored their boat near North Sentinel Island in the Andaman Sea. They weren't explorers. They weren't missionaries. They were crab fishermen who had been drinking palm wine and fell asleep while their anchor dragged. By morning, their boat had drifted into the 3-mile exclusion zone, the invisible boundary that the Sentinelese have defended for 60,000 years. The protocol doesn't ask why you crossed. It only asks if you did. At 5:47 a.m., a fishing patrol spotted their boat from 400 meters away. The hull was intact. The engine was still running, but no one was moving. When the Indian Coast Guard reached the vessel, they found both men slumped over the deck. 17 arrows, exposed bones where the tips had been twisted on impact. Their eyes were still open. Forensic analysis later confirmed they remained conscious for at least 4 minutes after the first arrow pierced through. Long enough to see the second volley coming, but too injured to move. Cause of death. Hemorrhagic shock secondary to multiple penetrating trauma. The arrows had severed the femoral artery in both victims within 8 seconds of each other. The Sentinelese had executed the protocol with surgical precision. No warning, no hesitation. Because when you cross while they're watching, you don't get a warning, you get a demonstration. Case 2. John Allen Chau. Mark and Olga weren't the first. 12 years later, a young American chose to cross that boundary. Not because he was drunk, but because he believed. On November 15, 2018, John Allen Chau, a 26-year-old American missionary, paid fishermen $350 to take him to North Sentinel Island. He knew about the exclusion zone. He knew about the 2006 killings. He wrote in his journal, "I know they might kill me, but I believe they won't." Day 1. He paddled his kayak to shore, holding a Bible above his head. A teenager shot an arrow that pierced the Bible. Chau retreated. Day 2. He returned with fish and scissors as gifts. The Sentinelese laughed at him. A woman turned her back. 2 men took his kayak and broke it. He swam back to the fishing boat. The protocol had given him 2 warnings. He ignored both. Day 3, November 17th. He went back at dawn. The fishermen watched from 500 meters away. They saw him walking on the beach. Then they saw figures emerge from the tree line. Then they saw him fall. When his body was spotted the next morning, it had been dragged to the shoreline and buried in the sand. But before they reached him, Chau had enough time to write one final message with his finger. God, I don't want to die. Cause of death. Multiple arrow wounds to the neck and thorax. The Sentinelese had executed the same protocol they used 12 years earlier. 3 chances, 3 days. 1 outcome. Case 3. Cannibalism victim. But not all protocols look the same. In Papua New Guinea, the boundary isn't drawn with arrows. It's drawn with knives. In July 2011, in a village in the eastern highlands of Papua New Guinea, a 20-year-old woman was accused of being a sanguma, a witch who consumed souls. Her boundary violation wasn't physical, it was spiritual. 3 days before her death, a village elder's son had died from malaria. The community needed someone to blame. They chose her. The warning came as a public accusation. 50 witnesses, no defense allowed. The protocol had already decided. On the 4th day, they dragged her to a clearing outside the village. 7 men held her down while the elder made the first incision, a 6-inch cut below the sternum. She was still breathing when they began removing her organs. According to the ritual protocol, the sanguma must be conscious when the extraction begins. They believe pain is the only way to release the evil spirit trapped inside. Her screams lasted 7 minutes before shock set in. When police arrived 12 hours later, they found only bones and ash. The villagers had consumed what they believed was contaminated flesh, not as food, but as purification. Cause of death. exsanguination during the live organ removal. The protocol wasn't about territory. It was about spiritual contamination. But the structure was identical: boundary, warning, execution. Case 4. Hamar tribe victim. Some protocols have no appeal process. In Ethiopia, the Hamar tribe enforces boundaries that even apologies cannot undo. In March 2014, a 32-year-old Italian tourist named Marco Ferretti wandered into a Hamar village in Ethiopia's Omo Valley during a sacred ukuli ceremony, the bull-jumping ritual that marks a boy's passage into manhood. Outsiders are permitted to watch, from a distance, behind the designated line. Ferretti crossed that line to take a photograph. His camera flash went off 4 feet from the initiate's face. In Hamar culture, disrupting the ukuli doesn't just dishonor the boy. It curses his bloodline for 3 generations. The boundary Ferretti crossed wasn't physical, it was generational. The warning came in Hamar language. Ayya, ayya. Go back, go back. Ferretti didn't understand. He smiled. He raised his camera again. Within 11 seconds, 6 men surrounded him. He finally understood. Witnesses reported he dropped to his knees and attempted to say, "Yihara, I'm sorry," in broken Hamar. But the protocol has no exception for apologies. They beat him with ceremonial sticks for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. He remained conscious for most of it, long enough to keep repeating "Yihara" until his jaw was broken. Cause of death: traumatic brain injury from blunt force trauma. His camera was found 15 meters away. The memory card was never recovered. Case 5. Portman expedition. The Hamar protocol dates back 400 years, but on North Sentinel Island, the same protocol has been enforced for 138 years, with documented proof. On January 25, 1880, a British naval officer named Maurice Vidal Portman landed on North Sentinel Island with a team of armed soldiers. His mission: friendly contact with the indigenous population. The Sentinelese responded with arrows. Portman responded with rifles. Within 3 hours, his men had captured 6 Sentinelese, an elderly couple and 4 children. He brought them to Port Blair for observation and study. The elderly couple died within 2 weeks. British medical records list the cause as exposure to foreign pathogens. Their immune systems had never encountered the common cold. Portman returned the 4 children to the island with gifts: coconuts, cloth, and metal tools. He documented their reaction in his naval log. They showed no gratitude. They threw the gifts into the sea and raised their bows. That was 1880. The protocol was already in place. 144 years later, the Sentinelese still fire arrows at any boat that approaches within 400 meters. The same distance, the same response, the same message. The British didn't discover a hostile tribe. They created a documented record of a protocol that was already ancient, and gave the Sentinelese a reason to never stop enforcing it. Boundary, warning, execution. For 60,000 years it worked. Portman proved that even empires couldn't change it. Case 6. Korowai victim. Papua New Guinea isn't the only place where the protocol turns inward. In West Papua, the Korowai tribe believes some people aren't people at all. In September 2009, in the jungle canopy of West Papua, a Korowai tribesman named Bunup was accused of being a kakwa, a witchman who disguises himself as human to consume souls from the inside. 2 weeks earlier, Bunup's nephew had died from a fever. The village needed an explanation. The elders consulted the spirits. The spirits chose Bunup. The boundary he crossed wasn't physical, it was ontological. The moment he was named Kakwa, he stopped being human. The warning was the accusation itself, delivered publicly, in front of 40 witnesses. In Korowai law, there is no defense. The spirits have already decided. On the 3rd day, they led Bunup to a clearing. His arms were bound with vine. His legs were staked to the ground. According to Korowai belief, the Kakua must be alive when the ritual begins. Pain is the only mechanism that releases the evil soul trapped inside. So they started with the extremities. Bunup remained conscious for approximately 19 minutes. Witnesses reported he stopped screaming after the first 6, not because the pain ended, but because his larynx was removed. Cause of death: systematic exsanguination during live dismemberment. The Korowai didn't murder Bunop. In their protocol, they saved him by killing the monster that had taken his body. Case 7. Amazon oil workers. But not all protocols are ancient. Some were created by modern corporations and enforced by the tribes they displaced. On March 5, 2013, a team of oil workers from Amazonas entered the Yasuni Biosphere Reserve in eastern Ecuador, one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth and home to at least 2 uncontacted tribes, the Tagari and Taramanain. The workers weren't explorers, they were contractors, paid $12 per hour to clear seismic survey lines through territory their employer knew was protected. 3 weeks before the attack, Indigenous monitors found warnings: 8-foot spears driven into the ground next to survey equipment. The oil company logged the report. They sent the workers back anyway. The boundary had been marked. The warning had been given. On March 5th, at approximately 2:30 p.m., a group of Taramanain emerged from the forest carrying wooden lances. The attack lasted less than 4 minutes. When rescue helicopters arrived 6 hours later, they found 2 bodies. Carlos Duarte, 34, had been struck 11 times. His colleague, whose name was never publicly released, had been decapitated. The Taramanain had executed the protocol, but they didn't choose the targets. Amazonas had chosen for them. By sending $12 per hour workers across a boundary the company knew existed to extract oil the company knew was contested. Cause of death: penetrating trauma from wooden projectiles. The workers crossed the boundary, but the company drew the map. Case 8. Peru loggers. Ecuador wasn't the only place where corporations turned workers into targets. In Peru, illegal loggers learned that some forests have their own security system. On September 11, 2017, a group of illegal loggers entered the Madre de Dios region of southeastern Peru, home to the Mashco Piro, one of the world's last uncontacted tribes. The loggers weren't employees. They were contractors for a mahogany cartel, paid in cash to cut trees worth $30,000 each on the black market. The Peruvian government had issued 14 warnings about Mashco Piro territory in the previous 3 years. The cartel ignored all of them. The workers were never told. The boundary was invisible, but the Mashco Piro knew exactly where it was. On September 11th at dusk, arrows came from 3 directions simultaneously. The attack was coordinated, planned, precise. Roberto Urquia, 52, was struck first. 2 arrows through the shoulder, 1 through the throat. He fell 12 feet from his chainsaw. One of his colleagues managed to pull out a cell phone. He called his wife. The call lasted 47 seconds. For the first 20 seconds, he tried to explain what was happening. For the last 27, there was only screaming. Then the line went dead. When authorities reached the camp 3 days later, they found 4 bodies. Cause of death: hemorrhagic shock from arrow wounds. Average number of arrows per victim: 7. The loggers crossed a boundary their employers knew existed. The forest had its own security protocol. And unlike corporate security, it never takes a day off. Case 9. Jarawa attack. But boundaries aren't always about land. Sometimes they're about something smaller. Something as simple as a photograph. On February 8, 2014, a convoy of tourist vehicles traveled the Andaman Trunk Road, a 45-kilometer highway that cuts directly through Jarawa Tribal Reserve. The road was legal. The tourism was permitted. But the cameras were not. At kilometer 23, the convoy stopped. A group of Jarawa had emerged from the forest, 3 women and 2 children. The tourists began taking photographs. The Jarawa women turned their backs, the universal warning. One tourist, a 44-year-old man from Delhi named Vikram Sharma, stepped off the vehicle to get a closer shot. He ignored the guide's instructions. He ignored the women's body language. He raised his camera. The shutter clicked. Within 6 seconds, an arrow struck his left forearm. A second arrow grazed his neck. He fell backward onto the road, still holding the camera. The Jarawa didn't aim to kill. They aimed to stop. The arrows were warnings made physical, precise enough to wound, calculated enough to spare. Surma survived. But the message was permanent. A 4-inch scar on his arm and nerve damage that never fully healed. The photograph was deleted by police. But the boundary violation was already recorded, in the scar tissue that reminds him every day. Some boundaries aren't on maps. Some boundaries are measured in shutter clicks. Case 10. Surma Duel. Not all protocols are for outsiders. Some tribes turn the rules on their own and make death a competition. In August 2019, in the Omo Valley of southwestern Ethiopia, a 19-year-old Surma tribesman named Korowai stepped into a circle of packed earth. He wasn't being punished. He wasn't an outsider. He was a warrior. And this was his donga. Donga is the Surma protocol for manhood. 2 men, 2 6-foot wooden sticks. No armor. No rules except one. You cannot surrender. Korowai's opponent was Biko, 23, a champion who had won 14 consecutive matches. The village had gathered 200 witnesses for what everyone expected to be a quick defeat. The first strike fractured Korowai's left orbital socket. Blood filled his eye within 4 seconds. The second strike broke 3 ribs. He dropped to 1 knee. The protocol doesn't allow you to stay down. If you don't stand, you're not defeated. You're exiled. Your family disowned. Your name erased. So Korowai stood. The third strike landed at the base of his skull. The sound was audible from 30 meters away. He knew he was going to die. Witnesses said he looked directly at his mother before raising his stick one final time. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Biko's fourth strike was the last. Korowai fell forward and did not move again. Cause of death: traumatic brain injury with cervical spine fracture. He was 19 years old. He had followed the protocol perfectly, and the protocol had no exception for courage, for youth, or for a mother watching from the crowd. The boundary was honor. The warning was the challenge. The execution was the only acceptable outcome. Korowai didn't lose the donga. He completed it. 10 stories. 10 boundaries crossed. But this was never about savagery. This was about protocol. Every civilization draws boundaries. Every boundary comes with a warning. And every warning carries a consequence. The only difference? Some protocols are written in law. Some are written in blood. The tribes in this video didn't invent violence. They inherited a system that has protected their world for thousands of years while ours writes rules we rarely enforce. Their protocol is brutal, but it's consistent. Can we say the same about ours? Next video. What happens when the people who created the protocol become the ones who break it?